If I want a sermon, I'll go to church. If I want a lecture, I'll go back to school. What I want from the people on my TV, whether they're elected officials or journalists or doctors, is persuasion, not dogma. Without my dad, John Rowe, and my grandfather, Carl Noble, and the scoutmaster I mentioned, Glendon Huntington, and a school teacher named Fred King, who taught music. 4 men who, at any given time, all acted like my dad, and all acted like my friend, and all acted like a mentor in so many different ways. My scoutmaster forcing me to put on boxing gloves and figure it out. Who does that today? It doesn't happen, you know? My dad and my grandfather taking me back into our woods when I was very young and introducing me to the reality of chores. And in our house, chores meant you find the tree, you cut the tree down, you cut the tree up into pieces, you put the pieces of the tree into the cart, you get in the Massey Ferguson and you drag the cart 1.5 miles back to the woodshed. You unload the cart, you split the wood. Chop your own wood, my grandfather said. It'll warm you twice, right? Mm-hmm. And so forth, like the lessons in the woodpile, the lessons with my grandfather, the lessons of going into the woods and coming back with the fuel your family needs to be warm in the winter. Those things you don't teach, you experience or you don't. Right. Fred King curing my stutter when I was 16. Fred King tossing me the keys to his Lincoln Continental and asking me at 16 to drive him to Lynchburg, Virginia. This is a music teacher, to coach a chorus of women, a Sweet Adeline chorus of women. The guy had been up for 2 days. He was tired. He gets in the back seat of his own Lincoln Continental and goes to bed. I got a 3.5-hour drive. Have you ever driven a Lincoln Continental? It's like driving a dirigible. It's just, I'm just bad like this. And I got a map, and he's snoring. And I have to get my mentor 3.5 hours south. So men trusted me in ways that I worry a lot of young boys today don't get challenged and trusted. And I had that in spades growing up, and I was so lucky for it. And I didn't appreciate it at all at the time. But to answer your question, yeah, you look back at that and then ask yourself today, what's going on with fathers? What's going on in communities where 60, 70% of the kids are being raised without a father figure? And what chance do they have? And how can you make an impact with them? It's one of the things my foundation is really thinking about doing right now, is trying to get into some of these communities and showing them that a trade represents a way out. Mm-hmm. You know, so many of these communities, all they see is sell drugs or become an athlete, right? I mean, that's it. Mm-hmm. And so showing people possibilities, challenging them, all that matters.
In relationship to those people, what if a governor looked at those 4 men and said, what you are and who you are and what you believe in is no longer capable for you to do? The church your grandfather built cannot be occupied for the purpose it was created. So line up those 4 super important guys in your life and then realize a governor has told them what they can and can't do. Speak on their behalf.
I would simply apologize in advance to the governor for the incredible rebellion. And
okay, you're answering the question now.
That's what I'm saying. Well, if a governor told my grandfather he couldn't go worship in the church he built, what my granddad would do is go to the church he built to worship. It would just be a straight up act of disobedience. If a governor told my former scoutmaster that he couldn't hold a scout meeting in that church basement, I mean, to be reasonable regarding COVID, he probably would have said, okay, till when? And then the real answer, like the really important answer, would either be forthcoming or it wouldn't. If the governor can't tell a guy like that by what metrics reopening will be established, then they would reopen immediately.
Yeah.
Because they would see that as a complete farce. You can't shut down an economy or a church or a school. It's one thing to be able to say, look, we don't know when it's going to be safe to reopen. That's one thing. But it's another thing to say, we have no idea under what conditions we're going to reopen. That's something else, because it's very, very hard to go backwards. And I think that's what we're seeing now in so many different states. It's this stutter step. Because we don't have a clear understanding of what the world looks like when we go back, we don't go back. And so, to me, that's something you file under that which is screamingly obvious. You don't shut a thing down and not immediately come back with an explanation of how you're going to flip the switch back. The mistake I believe we made as a country was to accept that. And again, I'm not preaching insurrection. I'm just saying, wait, it's well and good and wise to lock things down when you have to get your head around the reality of what's happening. But with every passing day, if you don't have a plan to re-enter, you're not going to re-enter. And I think all the men that I mentioned in my life would be hardwired to immediately get to that place. They're very commonsensical people.
I look back on my dad, of the way, all of the hard knocks that he went through, my mom, they were just tough people. They were just really focused, hardcore, tough people. And I wonder, are we a shadow of that generation? Mike, I fear that sometimes, a good old World War, our parents and grandparents were the age that they got on ships and went and fought back the worst of everything there is. And are we sitting here representing a shadow of your grandfather's generation?
I hope not. I hope that World War II was a crucible. So was the First World War. So was the Spanish pandemic. So were so many tough times. Through adversity comes greatness. The greatest generation came through the most adverse of times. I don't know how adverse these times will become. But you can see, when you're in the middle of a storm, when you look around at the headlines and you can see the protesting, you can see the rioting, two different things. You can see the looting, you can see the unrest. You see all these things, and it feels novel, but it's not. We've been here before. And I wonder if the greatest generation felt great when they were doing what they were doing. I wonder if it's only in the fullness of time that you get perspective and context. I don't know, but I do believe, when we look back on 2020, 10 or 15 years from now, we'll see with clarity who was correct, who was precipitous, who was incorrect, who was haughty, who was right and who was wrong. It's really, it's not going to be nearly as confusing in the future as it is right now. But of course it never is.
Well, then I'm simply asking you to prophesy at this point, because I'm asking you for the answers now, not 20 years from now. I might be able to know them by myself, but I have you here now, and I'm asking for the answers now is kind of what's happening. Yeah.
Okay, so then I would say yes, we are a shadow of our forefathers. And I think part of the reason we're diminished, to go back to your earlier question, is because we no longer demand, the way the men in my life would have, to be persuaded. Make a persuasive case. I'm okay with being wrong, and you can talk me in to something if you're persuasive. I really believe I have an open mind, and I know my mentors did. But the onus is on you, the government, to persuade me. And I'll give you a certain amount of leeway. The more extraordinary the circumstances, the more leeway you get. These are extraordinary circumstances. But you don't get unlimited time. You don't get to sound certain all of the time. You don't get to change your mind every couple of days and still have my trust. You don't get to be earnest, perpetually earnest, and yet wrong, without expecting in me a new level of skepticism. So I'm still fundamentally an optimistic person. I don't think I'm cynical, but I am a skeptic in many things. And I have, as a result of the coronavirus, found myself insisting that the people who sound the most certain be more persuasive. I don't need a finger shook at me. I don't need it. If I want a sermon, I'll go to church. If I want a lecture, I'll go back to school. What I want from the people on my TV, whether they're elected officials or journalists or doctors, is persuasion, not dogma.
At TBN, our mission is to use every available means to reach as many individuals and families as possible with the life-changing gospel of Jesus Christ.
Thank you for helping make the gospel of grace go around the world.
Without you, we couldn't do it. God bless you.